The ongoing legal dispute between the Road Accident Fund and the Office of the Auditor-General shows no signs of resolution. At issue is the appropriateness of the accounting standards being used. A RAF obtained a disclaimer audit opinion in 2020-2021 after it used the international public sector accounting standards, which the AG found to be inappropriate. The Judge President of the Supreme Court of Appeal is set to decide on a petition RAF lodged after the same court refused to hear their leave to appeal. Yesterday, RAF CEO Collins Letsoalo told Scopa that they found it difficult to deal with such audits. Letsoalo joins me live now. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Letsoalo. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Let's start with this issue of the Auditor-General. The department and Parliament said they were keen to have you resolve this issue amicably, even though, as some MPs pointed out yesterday, that you were within your rights to go to court if that's what you would prefer. But following their preference for an amicable solution, but also a recommendation that you speak to the Office of the Auditor-General as well, what has happened since?
Well, good afternoon to you and the viewers. As I said yesterday, it's quite a difficult thing, but the reality is that this needs a technical solution more than a legal solution. Precisely because when you look at this thing, it is the fact why we land here is because the Accounting Standards Board was supposed to have a standard, which is the GRAP standard for social benefits, which simply does not exist so far in South Africa. And that's why we are using the IPSAS 42 standard. We have tried to engage the AG for obvious reasons. They have already taken a decision, and the only people that we can actually go to if you disagree with the AG is the courts. There's nowhere else we can go. We are trying to make sure that at least so far as the future is concerned, the ASB draws the standard and the standard come into being so that we can just account for social benefits as we are supposed to. We are not an issue.
But aren't these standards prescribed by Treasury for various categories of state-owned entities?
They are when they are there. As I'm saying to you, there is no standard of GRAP, General Recognized Accounting Practice Standards, that are issued by the ASB. We do not have one for social benefits in South Africa. So once you don't have one for social benefits or any other transaction that does not have a specific standard, you are allowed to go and use an IPSAS standard. After that, you can use what we call IASB standard as well, but you start with IPSAS standard. Once there is an IPSAS standard, which in this case there is, which is IPSAS 42 for social benefits, you are allowed to use that.
Well, in the same way that you are, for example, complaining about legislation that is not favorable for running the Road Accident Fund, but that legislation has been, the amendment legislation has actually been withdrawn. So why can't you wait for there to be a standard and then for the time being comply with what the Auditor-General says is what can be done under the current circumstances?
We are complying with GRAP 3, which is a standard which under the provision of GRAP 3, if there is no specific standard, you can use the standard of another accounting body, which we have done. All that needs to be done is to ask the ASB why they have not done what they're supposed to have done since 2008. The reality is that GRAP 3 allows us to use it, and that's what we did. As we said yesterday, it's a professional opinion. We have got other professional accountants, chartered accountants that have cleared this thing of what we did before we even went and announced what we have done. Once we have finalized that, it was reviewed and we found to be on the right. So the reality is this, that where there is no standard of GRAP, you can use an international standard, and that's exactly what we are doing. There's nothing that we have done that is outside what the provisions of GRAP have allowed.
Let's talk then about the other issues that came up or that were thrown up by members of the committee, but also which you yourselves raised together with members of your board during your appearance before SCOPA. Let's talk about the legislation that you reckon, both you and your board reckon, would make your lives a little easier. Why were you given, or are you aware of the reasons why the amendment legislation has actually been withdrawn?
Well, we are not. What we are told is that the department has taken a view that they are responsible for policy and legislation, which is not something new. And the view is that there is a different policy direction they wish to take, which is go the RAF's route, which, of course, when we recommended the certain changes as we are allowed in terms of our own act, in terms of, I think, this section 11 of our act that allows the board to actually recommend certain things to the minister. Those issues were raised, and we were asked whether we agree with the previous RAPs, and the agreement was that, well, we are moving in a different direction. Well, there is a policy decision to move in that regard. It is the minister's prerogative. It is well within her rights and the rights of whoever is in that position to take those decisions. So all we do is implement the law and the policy. So if the direction, notwithstanding what our views would be, is that there is a policy change, we must respect that decision. And that's what we are doing. We are respecting that decision. We'll wait for the policy. We'll wait for the legislation when it comes, and then we'll implement accordingly.
How would those policy changes stop what many people believe is or could well be the eventual demise of the Road Accident Fund?
Well, it's not up to us. I mean, the reality is that we run this thing on the basis of what is being said at policy, and people have got their own provinces. The policy and legislative space is the province of the minister, as it were, and there's nothing else we can do. I mean, if you are told your bosses have taken a decision, you follow that decision. There's nothing unlawful about what the minister would have done in this regard, and we respect that. And that's why we are saying we are following. Whether we believe it's going to be the right thing to do or not, it's something that is up for discussions and the recommendations we'll make. But all we can do is recommend. And therefore, when you recommend, it's like an advice. You know, that recommendation can be taken or it be rejected. So in this regard, we understand that the Amendment Act, as we put it, it means it has been rejected because it has been withdrawn. And therefore, there's a new policy direction that we have got to follow. We would look, as the chairperson of the board has said, at what the implications would be. Of course, we'll communicate those the implications thereof. But that's what we can do. There's nothing else we can do in this regard.
But would the changes that were bandied about before deal, for example, with the issue of the fuel levy, which in part you are complaining about the fact that there hasn't been an increase in that levy for quite a number of years. Does the legislation, as it was initially contemplated, deal with that matter and how to deal with it? I mean, how to resolve it?
No, so far as I know, no, it does not deal with those matters. There are a couple of issues it does not deal with, but that does not mean going forward it won't be able to deal with that. Remember, this is still a bill. We are told that we must make our own recommendations. Probably they would come into being. The issue that we have is that how long will it take? Because what we are saying is that we had something that was going here. The change in policy direction, in our view, might not give us enough time, because we were saying that in the next 2 years, if something is not done about the legislative framework of the RAF will simply shut down. And that's what position we are holding. We are hoping that even if this change comes, then the sooner it comes, the better for us. Then we'll know which direction we would have to move. The issue about the fuel levy, we are saying again that if we were given a dispensation that pays in annuity rather than lump sums, we can buy ourselves a good 15 years, simply because we do not think that social benefits must ever be paid in lump sum. It really does not make sense to do so. And we hope that this new legislation and the policy direction will support that. So if we support that, then we know that we are on the right track.
Well, I mean, that's one issue, the fact that, I mean, you have to pay these huge lump sums, but there are people who believe you should also take responsibility because you now find yourselves in a situation where you have to pay lots and lots of money than you would be paying if you had retained the services of lawyers who were representing you, who were able to get to or arrive at settlements that were much less than is the case at the moment.
There's no truth to that. People will always say that because change is painful. From medical costs, we have saved 12 billion over the period of this strategy. On legal costs themselves, we have saved ourselves 24 billion, and we are counting. So if you add the two, 36 billion over a period. So the fact that people are saying all the things that they are saying is not correct. People would want us to keep the lawyers in the system. Our argument is that there is no state all over the world that works on the basis of social benefits that are paid out once the person sues the state for their benefits. It has never worked anyway. And we are saying that addition to that, then you have to pay people in lump sums when you are getting your money in annuity. It just creates that mismatch. And therefore, we are quite comfortable that the strategy we brought about in the last 5 years and we've been implementing has shown results. As I'm telling you now, when we started, 29 billion was being paid, which was probably about 60% of the money we're receiving. As we speak now, about 90%, which is 45 billion out of the 48 billion we receive, goes to claims, payments, expenditure. And for us, that is what it's meant to. It is not about the lawyers. It's about the claimant. We'll continue to say so. We are taking more money to the claimant. Those that benefited from the status quo at the time will always complain because they made a lot of money out of it when it did not go to the claimant as it is meant to be. So we continue to say it is good that what we did, we have reduced legal fees, we have reduced medical costs, and we continue to do that to make sure that the claimant gets their fair share.
But by your own admission yesterday, those savings are not going to, stop the direction that the fund seems to be moving into.
It doesn't stop the direction. It has delayed this direction for the last 5 years. If you remember when I went in 2019 at the Road Accident Fund, the Road Accident Fund was about to shut. If we did not do anything about it, which means cut administrative costs to this level, we won't be talking about the Road Accident Fund today. Today we are talking about the Road Accident Fund because we took difficult decisions, and we are saying that it wouldn't stop, but it has delayed that. And we said, if it can't delay it forever, it must be a decision that has got to be taken about how we move forward. But what we are saying is that the idea that if we had this defense panel that was costing us 10.6 billion a year, now we have reduced it to 3 billion, that it continued in perpetuity, we would be sitting where we are sitting is totally incorrect. In fact, we know that our RNYP, which was our short-term debt, was going to grow to 51 billion. We reduced it last year to 8.2 billion. So that must tell you that what we had as a strategy has been working. So all we are saying is that there is a need for legislative change for it to be sustainable going forward.
What would the future be without RAF, God forbid?
Well, the future without RAF would mean that we would have claimants, at least 400,000 of them that would not be paid. You know how many is about 100,000 people that get injured, about 50,000 of them seriously. We know people that die, about 13,000 each and every year. Their dependents will just suffer because there won't be any fund. For the poor people who can provide for themselves, it will really be a disaster. And it would be unlikely that South Africans should allow that to happen.
Let's leave it there for now. Letsoalo, the Road Accident Fund Chief Executive Officer.